Hello, everyone, and welcome to the new episode of Entrepreneurship Lab. This is your host, Nevina Bajalac, welcoming you once again to the podcast where we help you grow and scale your business. Today, we talk about one of the most important topics and areas for every entrepreneur, and that's real estate. Because without real estate, you're not actually growing and scaling. That's something what I believe in, and experience shows with a lot of successful entrepreneurs. So our guest today is coming all the way from Colorado in the United States, and his name is Michael Pouliot. And Michael is actually founder and CEO of Eon, a technology-enabled real estate firm. And he has a very interesting story because he comes from the family of real estate entrepreneurs. And today he will share with us all his amazing achievements, managing portfolios of millions and billions of dollars, properties, and so on. And you're going to get so much value today. So, Michael, thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I hope I can live up to all of the great things that you said.
It's all true. It's all true. And it's really a pleasure having you here. And very often I have entrepreneurs who started and they're not coming from family of entrepreneurs. So in this case, I want to ask you, how was it growing up in a real estate family? How did it influence your success, your mindset? Was it difficult, competitive? Was there pressure, or it was really a blessing, to grow up with parents like that?
Sure, yeah. Good question. I don't think anyone has asked me that before, so I'm going to take the couple of seconds here to have my brain catch up with your question and figure out what I'm going to say. Yeah, I would say that I think it was like you know, my mother was a homemaker. She was at home, and my father was the more of the entrepreneur, although my mother's father and so my grandparents on both sides were also in real estate, some of which were more, worked for the city, so some of them did have jobs where they would build firehouses and police stations. That was more my father's parents. He was more of a blue collar type background. My mother's parents were more the entrepreneurs. And were the ones that had, didn't have jobs per se, but they kind of carved their own path. And so my father took a similar path, and that he was a real estate developer. And so I think that the big difference maybe between the having a job versus being an entrepreneur is it's a little bit more unpredictable so far as one, your income, but also some more flexibility there. He was always around for sports events and things like that, but it also meant that he worked Saturdays and Sundays sometimes, right? So there's some pros and cons to it. So I don't know that there was no I don't think he was purposefully trying to create entrepreneurs out of myself and my sister. I have an older sister, necessarily. I think he was just so focused on his business that I don't think he was as concerned about shaping us into entrepreneurs as much as anything else. Yeah, I would say a relatively normal upbringing. I think the entrepreneurship of things didn't really develop for me until I started working in the workforce. It wasn't something I didn't come through high school and college necessarily saying, "Hey, I'm going to go out and start my own business" or anything like that. I started my career on Wall Street, very much going through the traditional like finance track, working for J.P. Morgan and Merrill Lynch, and it wasn't until I kind of got into my career a little bit that I was like, "Wow, this is not necessarily what I thought I signed up for." And that's when I started to really pursue like, well, how could I, control my time more? How can I have more connection between my effort and my income? And that's when I started to understand more about entrepreneurship, what it meant, what it could do for me. And ultimately, I decided on real estate because I had some familiarity with it.
Yeah, I mean, I actually wanted to ask you as the next question. Did you started the news as you were a kid, following your parents' footsteps, or you just answered that for us? So your background is in a way finance. What exactly you did on Wall Street, and maybe what are some lessons you learned over there that help you as an entrepreneur as well?
Yeah, so I worked on when I left school, had my finance undergrad. I went and I worked, and this was in 2011. So this was, just after the financial crisis. So there weren't like a lot of jobs on Wall Street, but I was lucky enough to be able to get myself a position at JP Morgan's fixed income desk. So I worked alongside the trading group and the client relationship group to build portfolios for investors on the fixed income side, so bonds and things like that. So it was really, fast-paced, high pressure, long hours, exactly what you would expect and what maybe is depicted in, all the movies that people have watched. So I worked on a trading, floor where we all had these lots of screens and everyone was screaming at each other. Everything was due that day. I think some of the things that I learned there that have helped me in my entrepreneurship is I had some really great bosses in that time. They'd come through the finance world. And had to really cut their teeth in that business for 10, 20 years to get there. So I learned a lot from them. And primarily that was one, like I said, everything was sort of due the day it was assigned. So I learned very quickly from working 80, 90, 100 hours a week that anything that well, maybe not anything, but most things can be accomplished the same day that you start them. And I think that there's this like paralysis by analysis. There's this waiting game that occurs in some other places. And I just think that that's something that really has helped me as an entrepreneur that no matter what, if I just sit down and start, I'll have it finished if I just keep going until it's done. And so, and that really was instilled to me a lot when I was working in Wall Street because there was, a presentation client was coming in the next day. I was given the work at 9 o'clock at night. I just had to stay and get it done, and it had to be perfect by the time the client came in. And the second thing I would say was my boss. One of my bosses would say, her name was Margaret. She would say, you have to have an intense level of paranoia especially when you're working with clients. And so how that manifested was really around like making sure you never made any mistakes. So we had this rule. I don't know if these rules still exist there, but it was one error was like a warning. Second error, you were fired. So there was a very short leash as it related to making errors. That's specifically in client meetings. So if a client noted your error in a presentation, in a pitch book, in an Excel sheet, something like that, you'd have one like sort of yellow card. Second time it happened, that'd be it. You'd be fired. So you had to have an intense level of paranoia. You had to check your work. You had to make sure that you could rely on your team to help you with that as well. And so team building, intense paranoia, and just, I guess, the grit of knowing that you can really accomplish anything that you put your mind to as long as you just sit down and do the work.
Wow, I love it. And I love that like sense of urgency. And I think for entrepreneurs, especially, they got the paralysis, and it's so important just to take action and take action, implement things. But on the other side, you had this pressure of perfection and not making mistake, which as entrepreneurs, we make a lot of mistakes. But I think it installed in you just the quality to make sure you check that your work is good, then you stand behind an excellence and excellent work. So I really love that. And since you're mentioning the leaders and good bosses, bad bosses, what was for you? I'm sure you had some excellent leaders when you worked there and some that are not. And for us as business owners, what do you find are characteristics of those excellent leaders that you like? What are their characteristics? What makes them a good leader comparing to those that are not?
You know, So there might be like a distinction between what's a good leader and someone I learned a lot from. So I would say that every boss I've had, I've learned from, whether they were a good boss, that, quote unquote, or a bad boss. Sometimes you can learn a lot from a bad boss, as it relates to, how you want to treat your people. Like when you go out on your own and you start to have your own employees, you can really look back and survey all the people who, you worked for or worked with, and you can pick the good and the bad and say, hey, I want to do a lot of this because I really like this, and I don't want to be doing this. And so, I would say that everyone is complicated, and I wouldn't want to call anyone out specifically about, being good or bad per se. But I learned from all of my experiences, all of the employment that I had, and they all shaped who I was, who I am, and how I show up today as a boss and a leader. And I'm not. I would say I'm a decent leader. I'm not a great manager. I think anybody who works with me would agree with that. I'm really more of that visionary person that has all the ideas, and then I rely on really great operators, really great managers that I either are partners of mine or colleagues or people that in their teams to execute on those ideas. So, yeah, that would be it.
Yeah, and I love that you're reflecting, you understand your strengths and your weaknesses, which is so important because sometimes, especially at the beginning, we believe we're the best in everything and we should do everything. And actually, we should learn that that's not true, and we should know our strengths and use them because everyone has their strengths, and then have a team of people that's going to have strengths in the areas we don't, and really complete the whole team. So speaking of all the listeners who are maybe building their business, and I would like to know for you, what is, I like to ask this question, like if you can go back in time and you wish there is one thing somebody told you when you were building your business that will maybe help you build it faster, or you would avoid some crucial mistake, what would that one thing really be for you in building a business?
So, um, so one thing that comes up a lot for oh geez, I have to say one thing. So I'm going to say two things because one thing it's very hard to say
Yes,
one thing.
go for it.
So
We
I'm going to
like
give
it.
two
Two
things.
things.
So one is about I think this is something that anyone who goes and looks for entrepreneur talent will see, and it's a hallmark of entrepreneurs is this shiny objects syndrome, right? Where you're always constantly looking for the next thing that's going to get you the unlock, the secret, the shortcut, the hack, and or just so I think that the learning or the thing is that you really have to pick one thing or really and really try to focus. And I think that can be really hard for entrepreneurs, people who have that kind of mindset or that personality, really coming in and focusing on one thing or a very small set of things. You mentioned it as it relates to, what you're good at. I may have to, my business may have to do 50 great things like all the time. I may only be able to do two or three of those things well. And there's still people out there who can do those things better than me. So, I really think about, trying to focus on just one or two things and how that might, an example of that might be in our business in real estate. I find a lot of people who are trying to get off the ground, they'll try to go after many different types of deals, right? They'll go after single family deals, commercial deals, they'll chase probate deals, they'll chase foreclosures. They'll just be trying too many different things and just not be able to get the traction. And then they get discouraged and then they give up. So like they're from their perspective, they're giving a lot of action. They're taking enormous amounts of action, but it's in so many different directions that they're building a bunch of half bridges. People say like they're building a bridge halfway and then they never complete the bridge. So they never get the dopamine of like, oh, this worked. And then they can reinforce that dopamine and continue to do that action over and over and over again. So I would say shiny object syndrome is one thing that people really have to watch out for. And second, kind of related to that would be systems building. So that's one thing that I have uh, that I focus on in my business is really thinking about how to systematize things, even if that includes a person involved in the system. Really, so it's not about necessarily automation or like automating everything out of your life, but it's just about coming up with some way of repeating an activity over and over and over again the same way so you can get reliable baseline information about how it's working and how it's not working, and then you can make improvements to it. I find a lot of times, again, entrepreneurs, they're sort of like can-do attitude. We'll get it done any way we can. And then every time they're executing an activity, even if it's every single week, they may do it a little bit different. So it's really hard to get reliable data about what's working, what's not working, how can I make it better. And so it's important to be thinking about that constant improvement of systems, but that starts with at least building that system first and then looking at it and then making improvements. So those would be the two things that I've learned in my career so far.
I love it, and I think yes, it's so important, and we appreciate you sharing because every time we kind of hear it from a different angle, makes a difference. And I remember because I wanted as an entrepreneur to learn about real estate. I also had a period I worked as an agent because I wanted to have hands-on experience, which was amazing, really. And I remember the same thing. A lot of people were not focused. You were supposed to focus on a specific area. For example, in Dubai really study, understand the market in that area, understand the buyers, get to know the sellers, build your name in the community. And then the deals were just coming and rotating. But many people were just trying to close a deal. And then at the end of the year, they would get nowhere because they're just trying to sell off plan, secondary, like you say, homes, apartments, then commercial. And it made no sense because you're specializing in nothing, right? So I think that's a great advice for anyone listening. Try to really specialize in an area, whatever your business is or your skills, and then get the support in the other areas that you need. So talking about real estate, where would you say people should start? Not necessarily they want to have a real estate business, but to invest because real estate help us build wealth, and I believe it should be always part of our portfolio. So, what is if somebody listening and they still don't have real estate? Where do you think they should start?
Sure. Yeah. So I think, at least for me, I started with learning. I think that you can do a lot there. I think you don't want to get stuck in learning forever. But I think when I started, I probably spent at least 3 to 6 months really diving in, reading all of the books, like the beginner books, the how-to stuff, really getting comfortable that that I knew enough information. Not everyone needs to do that. I think everyone has a different personality on how much information they need to have before they can take action. But if you're spending more than 6 months in that phase, it's time to move on to the next phase, which is actually go out there and take action and apply what you're learning in if podcasts, books, whatever courses, etc. In my experience, specifically, I always recommend that people start in single family. They try to do a transaction. It depends on what their goals are, of course. If they want to be a landlord, they want to flip homes, they want to trade contracts and wholesale deals, or they want to ultimately work full time, right? If you just want to have this on the side, you have maybe a different path and a different approach than if you wanted to make this a full-time business. So that certainly matters. But regardless of what their end goal is, I always recommend that you start with the smallest potential unit of real estate as possible because you're going to make a lot of mistakes on your first deal, and those mistakes in real estate tend to mean money. Typically, it means that you have to solve problems. I'd rather people have to solve like $100 or $1,000 problems than going after projects that are very large and then they have to solve 10,000, $100,000, $1 million problems that they're not yet prepared to solve for because they haven't built their team, they don't have a network of capital sources, and they just don't know enough about what they don't know. So really starting my first transaction, I bought a $25,000 home, 960 square feet in Philadelphia. I fixed it up, put $40,000 into it, and then I refinanced it, and it was worth 125,000. I pulled out all my money, and then I just said, "Hey, that worked out really well. Let's go do that again, but let's do a few of them at the same time." So I sort of gradually, did the first project. Then I said, "Hey, let's do three of the same. Let's do some more." And then it wasn't until I had done 10 or 20 of those size transactions that I really started to move up to, larger and larger property. And now we bought hundreds of millions of dollars worth of property.
Yeah, it's incredible. And it's inspiring because often I also thought that I need hundreds of thousands of dollars to start. And now I'm sharing my experience. I'm currently here in Zanzibar building my first Airbnb and realizing,
Mhm.
hey, there are different places in the world that if maybe in your home country you cannot invest, there are different places where you can, and you should travel also and learn the regulations and laws. And you can start with the land and building or take a mortgage loan,
Mhm.
whatever it is, but you can start somewhere. And I believe all of us have to really focus they say without a land or real estate, you have nothing. So I
Mhm.
really started believing in that and learning from experience from, successful people, entrepreneurs like yourself as well, that how much real estate is actually important for a future and financial freedom that we all want. So, as we're wrapping the episode, I would love to ask you one last advice that maybe you have for the listeners that we didn't mention. It can be regarding real estate or regarding building your business, whatever it is that you think it's important and can help everyone listening.
Sure. Yeah. So we talked a lot about systems and getting educated and starting out small. And I think one piece of advice that maybe we haven't talked about is, that this is still a people business. And so as you're thinking about building a team, whether those people are just your partners or your colleagues or eventually your employees, um, you know, it's amazing what one person can do. So we always think in our businesses, all the business that I'm a part of, what is the one person I can hire this quarter that's going to have the biggest impact on my business. And so for different people at different phases, that's going to be a different person. For a real estate agent, that might be hiring a transaction coordinator, right? It might be taking the administrative burden off so you can focus on sales. Or it might be you're spending all your, back to real estate agent. If you're, in the maybe you're showing a lot of property, maybe it's finding like a junior agent that can take over some of your showings and things like that. So, depends on what you're doing, but really think about what is that high leverage hire that you can make, and it takes a while to learn how to hire people well. So start early, fail fast, and you'll eventually get to the point where you're hiring that one person maybe every quarter on your team that really is game changing. You'll look back a few years later and be like, wow, I've got 15 or 20 amazing rock stars on my team. And they are the ones driving the business forward. They're the ones coming up with ideas. They're doing the hiring now according to your processes, and all of a sudden the business has a life of its own that goes beyond you, which I think is the goal as an entrepreneur. Is eventually, you're sort of starting from the seed and building it from scratch, but eventually you want it to be able to thrive on its own and have its own ideas, right, and do its own things and come back to you and say, hey, I think we should, here's an expansion opportunity, here's an opportunity to do this, here's an opportunity to do this. And so that's the goal, at least for my perspective, is to get the businesses to the point where they're self-sustaining, they're growing internally, and that we're giving opportunity to everyone on our teams to grow and thrive in that environment.
I love that. Thank you so much, Michael, for being here today and sharing all your experience and knowledge with
My
us.
pleasure. Yeah, it was my pleasure. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. Make sure to connect with Michael on social media, follow him and his amazing entrepreneurship journey. Give us some likes, hearts, comment below what you think about episode, and let us know what would you like to hear in the future episodes as well. And like I always say, share this with at least one more person that can benefit from the this episode, because sharing is caring and we are here to give value to you and other entrepreneurs. Thank you for listening, and I see you in the next episode.